years. That statement proved to be prophetic. Jews began to stream back to their homeland, purchasing arid desert land and malaria-infested swamps. The next crucial turning point came during World War I. During that war, the Turks sided with the Germans. When the Germans lost the war, so did the Turks. Both the German and Turkish empires were divided up by the Allies. Palestine, a name describing a desert region, not a country, had been part of the Turkish Empire for 400 years, ever since 1517. In 1920, Palestine was assigned to the British as a League of Nations mandate. This meant the British would be responsible for establishing the people with an eventual self-government. 3 years earlier, in November 1917, in anticipation of receiving the territory of Palestine, the British had issued the Balfour Declaration, in which they declared that it was their intention to provide a homeland for the Jewish people within Palestine. Arabs in the area were outraged by this promise, and in 1922, the British Foreign Secretary, Winston Churchill, decided to give the Arabs 2/3 of the land the Jews had hoped to receive. This land was used to create the new state of Jordan, a territory overwhelmingly populated by Palestinians. This is the reason that many historians have stated that a Palestinian state already exists. Jordan not only contains an astounding 2/3 of the geography of historic Palestine, its population is also over 75% Palestinian. In 1947, the United Nations voted for the British mandate to end and for the State of Israel to be created. But to the shock of the Jews, the UN proposed dividing the Jews 1/3 of the territory between them and the Arabs, leaving Israel with only 15% of the land they had originally hoped to receive under the terms of the Balfour Declaration. However, the Arabs declared they wanted all the land, so they launched an attack on the Jews to destroy any hopes of them forming the nation of Israel. As long as the Arabs were winning the war, the UN simply looked on as an observer. But the moment the Jews turned the tide and started winning, the UN intervened and insisted on a ceasefire. In 1949, the so-called West Bank was annexed by Jordan, and the Gaza Strip was annexed by Egypt. Jerusalem was left divided. The Jews had control of Western Jerusalem. The Jordanians controlled the Old City and East Jerusalem. Under the armistice terms, the Jordanians agreed to give the Jews access to the Western Wall for prayer. But once the agreement was signed, the Jordanians refused to honor this agreement. No Jews were allowed to go to the wall for the next 18 years. The Jordanians also blew up all of the Jewish quarter in the Old City, including the ancient synagogues, which resulted in a tremendous loss of glorious architecture. In the Six-Day War of June 1967, Israel conquered the West Bank, the Golan Heights, the Gaza Strip, and all the Sinai Peninsula. Under international law, Israel was entitled to keep these lands because they were won in a defensive war. However, in 1978, Israel surrendered the Sinai Peninsula to Egypt in return for a peace treaty. Since that time, through the Oslo peace process, the Palestinians have been granted the Gaza Strip and most of the West Bank. But this still has not provided a peaceful resolve because they do not accept the declaration of the existence of Israel. Extraordinarily, when the West Bank and Gaza were under Jordanian autonomy, the PLO was formed to represent the Palestinians, but never organized itself to create a state, only to drive out the Jewish state, even though the Palestinians have always had complete access to their holy shrines.
I am standing at the Lion's Gate of the Old City, also known as St. Stephen's Gate. Let me show you this gate on a diagram. Here is the outline of the Old City. The gate at the north is the Damascus Gate. On the west, the Jaffa, the Zion Gate. This is the Kidron Valley running down between the city on the west and the Mount of Olives over here on the east. We are standing here at the Lion's Gate. This is the gate that the commandos entered in 1948. The Mount of Olives is right across the old city over here, and here is the Temple Mound. This right here indicates the Golden Gate, or the Eastern Gate, that is currently shut. In 1948, when the war ended, the city was divided between the Israelis and the Jordanians along this line, with Israel on this side and Jordan over here. According to the prophet Ezekiel, this gate, the Golden Gate, will not be opened until the Messiah returns.
Nobody knows for certain why the gate was ever closed, but it was shut almost 500 years ago in 1517. It occurred when the Turkish Sultan, Suleiman the Magnificent, conquered the city and decided to rebuild the walls. The legend is that while the walls were being rebuilt, a rumor spread that a Jewish Messiah was coming. When Suleiman inquired as to the meaning of the rumor, the Jewish rabbis explained that their scriptures, known as the Torah, prophesied that one day a Messiah king will come from the east, and that he will enter the city through the eastern gate and will liberate the Jews from their oppressors. To prevent this, Suleiman ordered that the eastern gate be sealed and that a Muslim cemetery be placed in front of it. He believed those two actions would stop any Jewish holy man who might try to liberate the city. The gate has been closed since that time. However, he unwittingly placed an unfulfilled prophecy in motion.
Then he brought me back the way of the gate of the outward sanctuary which looketh toward the east, and it was shut. Then said the Lord unto me, This gate shall be shut, it shall not be opened, and no man shall enter in by it. Because the Lord, the God of Israel, hath entered in by it, therefore it shall be shut. It is for the prince. The prince, he shall sit in it to eat bread before the Lord. He shall enter by the way of the porch of that gate, and shall go out by the way of the same.
For 19 years, the Jordanians refused to allow Jews to enter the old city to pray at the sacred Western Wall, or Wailing Wall, but all that changed drastically and dramatically in June of 1967, when the Six-Day War broke out with Egypt. The Egyptians persuaded the Jordanians to enter the war, and when they did, the Israelis stormed the old city. They broke into the city at the Lion's Gate. You can still see the pockmarks left in the wall from the fierce firefight that occurred there. The soldiers headed immediately for the Western Wall, the most sacred spot in all this land to the Jewish people. Let's go there.
The Western Wall is significant because it is the only thing that the Romans left standing when Titus destroyed the Holy Temple of Jerusalem in 70 AD. Since that time, it has become the center of mourning over the destruction of the temple and Israel's exile. It represents to the Jewish people the memory of Israel's former glory and the hope for its restoration. Because of this association, it is also referred to